one with Ava Gardner in it and John Huston. That one was, I mean, that's a million years ago, but that basically took you to the sacrifice of Isaac. I believe so, yes.
And I can't remember other people, but I thought it was quite good, but I didn't know what you thought.
I'm always very hypercritical of biblical movies because I feel that they take such license as to lose the essence of the Bible in favor of sensationalism or Hollywoodizing. And so even like the Ten Commandments, as much as I love, you know, Charlton Heston as Moses, the whole love affair with Nefertiti and all of that, you know, that's Hollywood. You can't take that as any sort of biblical record, you know. But I mean, the general story is there. I mean, he does a pretty good job in going over like the Passover. I thought that was very good.
As an overview, it might be.
I certainly think it can't hurt if there's anything about it that you think is questionable or is like, did that really happen? Or if that was in the story, I would bring it up and then I'd have to see it. But like the movie I just mentioned, the Bible, it's pretty very simple in its basic presentation of it, as far as, you know, the creation, the fall, the flood, the building of the Tower of Babel, and then getting into Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. It's okay. It's a good way to get some context as to what it's saying. Yes?
You started Joseph over here, and maybe I'm looking at the Old Testament only. What about David? It's been brought up so much.
Oh, David's not in the book of Genesis.
Oh, I see. That's right.
This is only the book of Genesis.
I'm thinking of the Old Testament.
Yes, as a whole. No, this is just the book of Genesis. And this is why it's going to take so long to, or not so long, but longer to get through it. Because in here we have 3 of the 6 major covenants established. We have the covenant with Adam after the fall. We have the covenant with Noah after the flood, and the covenant made with Abraham, which sets up the whole history of the Jews. So 3 of the 6 biblical covenants are in the book of Genesis alone. That's a major deal. Okay? So that's why we need to take some time with this, more so than I did in the first go around. I'm also intending to read more from the scriptures itself than I did before, just to give you a sense of richness and deep depth into our study of this, because I think in what I did before was good, but it can always be better. And I'm always the worst critic of myself. I had spent a lot of time with my principal today talking about that, about my own teaching style and stuff. And anyway, and how very uncomfortable I feel about this new freshman class coming in and how well I can manage it and all that. Anyway, it's something to pray for me about next year. I've seriously considered quitting because of this. It's a very tough group coming in. And I mean, behavioral-wise, academic-wise, it's an extreme case that's coming into our high school. And I mean, it's really something. Anyway, I don't want to go into that right now. The point is, this is why we need to go over this very carefully, because all of these events are the main parts or points of the story of Genesis. And this is what sets up the rest of the story of salvation as it unfolds in the Old Testament. So you understand more about David better when you understand where he comes from.
I got confused with the end.
Mm-hmm.
There's this part.
Yes.
Genesis.
Yes.
Thank
So
God I started reading. I was reading it while you were teaching the end of the Bible.
Ah.
And I thought, oh my gosh, and now you're going to the beginning, and I started reading the New Testament. I'm really screwed up.
you keep switching your gears on
Yeah,
that.
I know where I'm at. I know where I'm at.
Good, good. Before I go any further, I do want to make another plug. This won't be for something until September. I know that seems like a million years from now, but trust me, it comes a lot faster. Catholic Answers, you know, I'm a big advocate of Catholic Answers. They have a radio show on, or at least they used to, on Relevant Radio. You can catch them on the internet. They're on EWTN. They're a lay apostolate whose goal is to provide answers for the Catholic faith. This is their magazine that they put out bi-monthly. And on the back, it's not even on their website. So I pulled up their website hoping I could get some more information, but this is the Catholic Answers website, where if you had questions about something, like they have popular searches about Mary, about purgatory, about prayer, adoration, the Bible, you can get those. They have excellent articles on here for free, a free course explaining the Eucharist, all kinds of things that you ever wanted. This apostolate was very instrumental in helping me convert to the faith by providing faithful Catholic answers to very tough questions. Well, in September 26th through the 29th, it's not even up on their website yet, but it is in their magazine. They're having their annual conference in San Diego, and the theme this year is the early church was the Catholic Church. So it says, today's myriad Protestant denominations all claim identity with the true church founded by Jesus Christ as it existed in its earliest, purest form. But look what we find in the church during the ages of the apostles and the early fathers. 7 sacraments, the primacy of the Roman pontiff, devotions to Mary and the saints, and at all center of it, a liturgy representing the sacrifice of Calvary. If this sounds like Catholicism to you, that's because the early church was Catholic. All Catholics who want to know and defend the faith need to learn about the time of the apostles and the early fathers, because it is in these ages that the Trinitarian, Christological, and Marian doctrines are defined, the structure and operation of the church matures, and the form of Eucharistic worship takes place. To deepen your knowledge of this exciting time in church history, join the Catholic Answers apologists along with special guest speakers at our 2019 conference, The Early Church Was the Catholic Church. And just to give you some names here that you may or may not have heard, some of the speakers are Jimmy Akins, Father Hugh Barber, Carlo Broussard, Chris Check, Trent Horn, Cy Kelly, Tim Staples, Rod Bennett, Father David McConey, Monsignor Eugene Morris, and the keynote speaker, Most Reverend Frank Caggiano. So those are the chief speakers and what the conference is going to be like. I would really strongly encourage you to make plans to go to the conference, to learn more about what the early church believed. It was also, I would have to say that it was during my studies of the early church through the fathers that I came to see for myself that the early church was not Protestant. They didn't have little Bible studies. The early church was centered around bishops, the liturgy of the Mass, belief in the real presence of Jesus in the Eucharist, had devotion to the saints and Mary, believed in a purgatory for those that need purification from their sins, and had allegiance to Rome as the head of all the churches. These are found in the earliest of the church history's documents. And when you put all that together, that's far from Protestant. If anything, it's Catholic. And so you have to wonder, if we're going back to the early church, what was the early church like? I've said this before and I'll say it again. One of the things when I was an evangelical that we struggled with is that if we're going to follow the Bible only for what it says, one of the things it doesn't tell us is how to run a church service. You will look in vain in here to find out how to order your service. You know, when does the choir sing? When does the offertory given? When does the prayers go up? You won't find anything like that in here. Nothing. So Protestant church services basically make it up. They just make it up. And I always kind of tease some Protestants. I go, where in the Bible do you have the choir sing the first and third stanzas? Where's the offertory? Those are just, I mean, you go to a Presbyterian church and, you know, you come in, there's announcement, you sing hymn number 525, first, third, and last verses. Then the choir sings. There are more announcements, and then there's a special singer, and then the pastor comes out, he gives his sermon, the offertory is given, the altar call is made, and that's a church service in a nutshell. Where is any of that in here? I don't see any of that happening. None. Well, you know, it just developed. Oh, well, where is it? If we're supposed to follow the Bible only, where is that? Where is it? And the answer is nowhere. And so they may say, well, where do you find the Mass? I don't see priests and nuns and deacons and cardinals in here. Where do you get all that stuff? You're making it up too. Oh, are you sure about that, my small wonder? I wouldn't put too much money on that. You know why? Because you read in the book of Timothy, for example, the book of 1st and 2nd Timothy, and it says, for example, 1 Timothy 3, the saying is true, if anyone aspires to the office of bishop, he desires a noble task. Now a bishop must be above reproach, the husband of one wife, temperate, sensible, dignified, hospitable, an apt teacher, not a drunkard, not violent, but gentle, not quarrelsome, no lover of money. He must manage his own household well, keeping his children submissive and respectful in any way. For if a man does not know how to manage his own household, how can he care for God's church? Do you see that? There's instructions right there from the Apostle Paul on how to ordain bishops and where they come from. So that means that the office of bishop was there during the time of the apostles. So we're not making that up. You get it?
Did it say how to manage his wife?
His household. How to manage his household.
I thought I heard the word wife.
No.
I did not.
No. He must be the husband of one wife.
He must be the husband of one wife.
Right.
So he had a wife.
Yes.
Okay.
Because in the early church, the apostles themselves had wives. Peter had a wife.
I'm okay with that. I just wanted to be sure.
Right. And what he was saying is that they can't be polygamous. They can't have more than one wife. Okay? Which was a common practice in the Roman world. You know, if you were wealthy, you had more than one wife. That was not uncommon. I mean, Solomon had a bunch of wives. Why can't I? So you see, the whole idea of marriage was beginning to also be codified. The understanding that Jesus said that you're one man, one woman. That whole idea was also being emphasized in the church. You can't preach this and not live it yourself. Now, later on from this time, it was centuries later that the church later mandated celibacy for its clergy. But in the beginning, that wasn't the case. It was in the church's wisdom that celibate clergy take the place of married clergy. Now, in the Eastern Rite churches, bishops are still celibate, but priests can have wives and households. But before they get ordained, they can't get them after they're ordained. Okay? So both East and West have that kind of restriction. All right?
So where does the priest not being able to get married come in? Is that in the Bible?
Yes. Paul mentions in the book of 1 Corinthians that it is better that a man be unmarried than to be married and be in service or ministry. And that laid the foundation for the church's wisdom to cause that to be a disciplinary practice within the church.
He also says, if you can.
If you can, yes.
It's not like something mandatory.
Correct.
Something comes from the Holy Spirit.
Correct.
God. So that's like, he put a question in between.
Yes.
So which is like, because I was also on the, I was Christian.
Mm-hmm.
And, when we were at school, there was like, if you can. So it's something like, that's the big debate between, the Christians and Catholics. So how come they cannot get married,
Uh-huh.
But it's something like you said, if you can.
Correct.
But it's kind of hard.
It is hard, and that's what makes it a gift, that if you are able to remain celibate and faithful to that, then you are, for lack of a better way of saying it, worthy to serve in the house of the Lord. And if you're not less of a person to do that. You should be fruitful and multiply and be with your wife and children and manage that household and raise them to be good Catholics. You see what I mean? So there's not a less dignity. It's just to be in the ministry in the West. You have to give up family life, earthly family life, in order to serve the household of God. That's why I keep saying our priests really need our prayers and our love and our support, because it's an extremely lonely and thankless job. Trust me how thankless it is. You don't know all